Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Hood with Tractor Zoom. I'm your host, Andy Campbell, and today we have a special episode of Trends in 10, where I'm going to cover the 2024 farm equipment market and what we might expect in 25. Now, this is a very truncated version of a longer analysis that we have, and you can find that on TractorZoomPro.com. Go to our resources tab, and you can access it there. We'll also put some breadcrumbs in the show notes. Also, if you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed to our stuff on social, make sure you do that now so the next trends that come out, you can be the first to know. Okay, I've already blown through a solid 30 seconds of this, so let's jump right into these equipment categories. Okay, starting with cotton pickers. That cotton picker market, there's a plug inside this snake of low-hour machines, less than 1,000 hours, that are not moving off of dealers' lots. It's a pricing problem, and essentially what that industry needs is the export market to open up so some of these machines can move on through. It's not just totally isolated to the cotton market, but it is certainly highlighted there, and it's a problem that they're trying to work through. Values, though, that we're seeing in the cotton market, at least from an auction standpoint, are relatively consistent year over year. Let's move on to the header market. Now, with the header market, both platform and row crop headers, those we're seeing differences in inventory levels year over year, surging somewhere between 30 to 33% year over year. What that is doing is forcing a few inventory reduction sales happen on dealers' lots, and that's dropping the auction price in just the last 60 days, so November into December 24, by 5 or 6%. That's fairly significant movement that we're not necessarily seeing in combines. So when you look at details of these, you can even go down to MacDon's Flex Draper, John Deere's 40-foot Flex Draper. And we used to see the values between auction and list be pretty tight in 22 and the early part of 23. Well, that's widened out considerably now as those auction values continue to fall. Okay, let's move on to probably the biggest concern in the industry, and that is combines. And it has been the biggest concern for over a year now. Starting with Class 7s. Class 7 supply rose about 15% year over year, and so that's contributed to about a 30% drop in the overall turn rates. Obviously, it hasn't contributed all to that drop, so that means that the sales rates are also slowing down on those. And from an auction value standpoint, between the 7s and the 8s, those are both dropping in value about 16 to 20% year over year. Now, the story has been that combines are falling. The bright spot is that when you look in just the last 60 days for Class 7s and Class 8s, they've actually risen just slightly in auction values. And I think that's largely attributed to the fact that harvest in many areas across the country, the yields were better than to be expected. And so from mid-October to December, we're hearing from a lot of our clients out there that the phones have been ringing and they're actually moving some sales through. So that is a bright spot in this entire industry. Now, once we move down to the Class 9s, 10s, larger combines, really took a good look at the X9 valuation, because the big question out there is who is potentially going to be this next buyer? And if there's no next buyers, are we going to see a massive depreciation on these used combines? Now, a lot of these X9s, especially the X9 1100, there's not a lot out there at auction yet. They're still so new. But the ones that have hit auction, both for the 1000 and the 1100, that we're seeing those in line and even above current or earlier 2024 trend line. And so we're not seeing a reduction in the ability to pay for these yet. But again, it's still pretty early in this large combine game. We're not seeing a lot of these go on to that second buyer at auction. Not quite yet, at least. Moving down to the forage equipment category and shifting gears there, that the best way to kind of describe the forage equipment is thank God for cows. The dairy industry, the feeder cattle industry, the fat cattle, they've propped up the equipment values there. So when you look at large round balers, supply is relatively steady, values are very steady, and forage harvesters, which can depreciate pretty quickly, at least year over year from an auction value standpoint, those are relatively consistent. So way to go, cows, eat more beef. Row crop tractors. Now, this is a big worry spot within the industry, and for good reason. They're, depending on size, the supply is increasing just some a little bit faster. So when you go from 175 to almost 300 horsepower, the supply in that has increased almost 50% year over year, which again is slowing down the turn rate at auction, which is also attributed to just slower sales that are happening at auction. But when you look at the overall auction values, about 13% drop in those smaller row crop tractors year over year. And just when you look at the past 2 months, the last 60 days, we're seeing it continue to drop about another 4%. When we move up to the larger row crop tractors, they've got a little bit more pressure. Obviously, more of that pressure is coming from the holding cost, the higher interest rate for those higher value machines. The supply there has jumped 60% year over year, and then turn rates are about half of what they were back in 2022. Certainly, we're in a different ballgame than we were then. Now, the auction values have declined sharply. If there's any kind of silver lining that we're seeing some of those tractors, at least the auction values start to stabilize here in the last 60 days, like the 8R 340s, one in particular that I dove into in our report, again, might be lifted up just slightly by better than expected yields at the end of the year. Okay, self-propelled sprayer market. One of the reasons why I'm concerned about this is the shape of the supply curve continues to rise year over year, month over month, and we're not seeing that slow down too much yet. It's up 42% in terms of overall supply year over year, and that's dropped the turn rate from last year of annualized turn rate at this time of almost 3 turns a year. Now we're down to a 1.2, pretty significant drop in the overall turn rate. And then the effect that is having on actual sales values out there, just in the last 60 days, we recorded about a 10% drop in the actual sales values of these. That's more significant than I've seen in any other type of category. So self-propelled sprayers are one that I'm definitely watching closely. Now, four-wheel drive tractors. Can't believe I forgot those after the row crop tractors, so let's fit those in here. They are another one where the supply is taking off faster. We haven't really seen it plateau yet. So about a 70% increase year over year in the supply of these tractors. Now, they can be less fickle than a self-propelled sprayer just because they're not as seasonal. They're a workhorse. They also can be used, depending on the type, across different industries. So a little less concerning out there than maybe the sprayers are, but nonetheless, a 70% year over year increase on top of how expensive the new machines are adds a lot of holding cost pressure. And so we're seeing more of those being put onto the auction market, dropping values a little bit. And we're at about a 15% drop year over year in the overall auction values of large four-wheel drive tractors. Okay, let's wrap this up with a talk about planters. Planters can be a tough thing to evaluate, but one of the things that in aggregate you can look at is overall supply of these on the market. We've only seen the dealership supply of planters in total increase about 10% year over year. A lot of this is because dealers are being judicious about what kind of trade-ins they're accepting, and a lot of farmers are taking those potential trade-ins, maybe moving them, whether it's a farmer-to-farmer trade or taking them to auction. That has helped reduce the dealership risk a little bit, but we are still obviously then seeing the turns slow down because the new sales are not coming off the lot. And so the impact that this is having to the auction market, though, is still fairly significant. When you look just at 12-row planters over the past year, on average, we're seeing those valuations drop almost 26%. Granted, they're fairly elevated from the supply chain issues we had post-COVID, but still, that's a fairly large valuation. So we expect that issue to hopefully plateau here now that the supply isn't in excess. One thing to consider as you go through this, and we laid this out in the detailed report that you can find on TractorZoomPro.com, is that you can anticipate a lot of these trends by following the money, whether it's the cattle market that's propping up the forage side, or whether it's a better than anticipated yield coming in here at the end of the year that's maybe propping up a little bit of the combine and somewhat muting the effect on the row crop tractors. That's good to keep in mind when we project towards 2025. What effect, if any, will tariffs potentially have? The farm bill that may or may not get passed and benefits to farmers. All those will have an impact on net farm income. Net farm income will impact the equipment valuations in combination with really understanding good current data on supply and what auction values are doing. So all that stuff you can find at TractorZoomPro.com. Make sure, again, that you are subscribing to this channel so the next time we put out a Trends in 10 or any other Beyond the Hood podcast, you can be the first to know. Thanks for joining me. Have a fantastic holiday season, everybody, and I hope to see you again soon.